Hello and welcome to this week's edition of Starting Line. I'm your host, Sarah Allen. Here on Starting Line, we always like to tell you what's been going on in the Minnesota House of Representatives. That way you know the background in which our featured bills are being introduced or heard in. Recently, the DFL majority released its budget targets. Although DFLers and Republicans have different ideas on how to deal with the budget deficit, both support paying back the school shift.
Our proposal will also do what Minnesotans expect, which is to square our state budget fairly and responsibly, without accounting gimmicks, and with a combination of reforms and cuts and new revenues. And that includes paying back the debt that we owe to our schools in full.
I do commend them for going after the shift. I mean, certainly it's something that we committed to and the DFL committed to. Glad to see they're working on that. We would rather see them work on priorities and pay off that shift with existing resources.
This week's Starting Line looks at House File 909, a bill that has bipartisan support. The bill provides education requirements for parents seeking a divorce or legal separation who have children younger than 18 years old. We sit down with the bill's sponsor, Representative Jim Davney, to learn more about the bill. Davney, a financial educator from Minneapolis, is serving his 7th term in the Minnesota House of Representatives, representing District 63A. Thank you, Representative Davney, for talking to us about your bill, House File 909. And to start off, can you explain what this bill would do?
Back in 1997, the Minnesota legislature established a parenting education process for couples who are divorcing and have minor children. And it was a recognition, I think, that sometimes when a relationship is dissolving, the parents still need to be parents. And they need to kind of renegotiate that relationship. How am I going to act towards you when we're no longer married, but we do have these kids at stake? And it really is, the parenting education expectations and education is focused on how do you make sure the kids are taken care of? How do you keep the kids out of the middle of the tensions between the parents? Let the parents resolve and dissolve the marriage, but keep the kids as stable and secure as possible. So what this legislation does this year is update that requirement. Brings it into the 21st century by, for the first time, allowing an online opportunity. So I don't necessarily have to travel someplace for these parenting education classes. I can sit down at my computer and take them, or maybe if I don't have a computer at home or if I don't have good internet access, I go down to the local library and do it there. It also establishes some standards so that we know that the folks providing parenting education, particularly if we're going to allow an online component that could be anywhere in the country, are doing it to what research shows are effective standards, while also building in some protections for the parents. Nothing that is said in the parenting classes can be used in the divorce proceedings. We want people to be able to be open and honest and converse and learn without feeling like they're going to be trading off their rights or abilities in the divorce proceedings, and also making sure that there's some protections in case there was domestic violence, because we don't want to put people back together into the same room for parenting classes if it's a matter of violence.
Who offers these educational classes for parents?
Primarily in Minnesota, it's the University of Minnesota Extension Service. Then the online component, there are some providers. Probably the best one that I'm aware of is out in Oregon. The guy has developed a real research-based approach. He's got some modules you can do online. A lot of focus on communication, because of course the communication changes when we're not living together anymore, and the communication changes as our relationship changes. How do you make sure that mom and dad are communicating directly with each other and not using the child or children as carrier pigeon? You know, tell your mom this, tell your dad that. No, you tell them. Let's let the kid, have the safety and security and just come to my house or come to your house and be a kid and not have to worry about also being the conduit of information between mom and dad.
So if parents don't take these classes, are they still able to get a divorce?
They can still get a divorce. The courts can require it. In cases of divorce, this is part of the process. What the judges will tell you is that most dissolving couples do this amicably, or as amicably as they can. They would much rather, they being the couples, they would much rather work out the issues themselves than have the judge do it. And the judge would much rather have them do it themselves than have to get into the middle of an emotional place like that. So there tends to be a pretty good compliance rate with the current requirement. The current requirement is an 8-hour class. What research has shown is if you've got good content in the class, you can actually accomplish the same thing in 4 hours. So we're reducing the requirement. One of the challenges that judges have seen is if you do 8 hours, often what people will do is you come in for 4 hours this Saturday and then 4 hours the Saturday after. People will show up for the first one, maybe not show up for the second one. So if we can do it all in one 4-hour shot and still accomplish the goals of working with parents to work on their communication with their ex and parenting their child through the transition and into the future, all the better. Let's do it in 4 hours, let's do it well, and let's make sure that the focus stays on the kids and the kids getting the parenting that they need.
What do you see as the hurdles of getting this bill passed?
Family law is always controversial. It's always very emotional. I think the fact that we've got bipartisan authors on the bill, and I'm very pleased with that, and an interesting coalition of folks came together to support it, does it well. But I also recognize, as I said, this is a very emotional area of law. It's always difficult to move parenting bills through the legislature because of the emotion attached to them.
Is there anything else you'd like to add?
You know, I do think that there's some significant opportunity here to work with parents, to be parents even when they're not going to be husband and wife. And that strengthens the situation for the child or the children. And I think that's powerful, that we can assist in that. We may not be able to keep you together as a couple. That's not the state's job. But looking out for what happens to the kids as mom and dad go through that process, I think is an appropriate place for us to say, you know, there's some resources in the community. Let's get you in contact with those resources. So while this difficult thing is happening, you're still acting like the adult in the room, and your kids are allowed to be kids, but in a safe and supportive setting.
Thank you, Representative Dabney, for shedding light on your bill, House File 909.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
Let's track House File 909 through the legislative process. It's had its introduction and first reading. It was referred to the Civil Law Committee, where it was passed, and then re-referred to the Judiciary, Finance, and Policy Committee, where it now awaits a hearing. You can learn more about these bills and others through our online news service, Session Daily. This nonpartisan news source employs a staff of professional writers, editors, and photographers that provide you with in-depth coverage of the Minnesota House of Representatives. You can also watch live coverage of committee and floor action on House TV. To see past bills featured on Starting Line, go to www.youtube.com/MN House Info and click on the Starting Line playlist. Coming up next week, Starting Line will feature a different bill and look to see if there's been any movement on Representative Dabney's bill or other bills we have highlighted. And remember, thousands of bills get introduced every legislative session in Minnesota. All of them first have to cross the starting line.